all of you have learned and read in depth. During the Fabrengen, which was a Fabrengen of incredible Giluyim, Yossi Ader, Mashiach Shebeter, and Shliach Begematria Mashiach. The Rebbe stood up and danced then right after the first Sikha of Fazes and Mecharim Michoel. It was right in the middle of Parshas Hasfarim. At a certain point in the Sikha, the Rebbe spoke about the Shluchim and asked them to say L'chaim. In the second Sikha, the Rebbe said a short line, which, Fiadias Daiti, is very relevant to everyone sitting here. We all know that one of the biggest enemies of the Rebbe is Amalek, Chassidus, Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe was very, very adamant about something we can Amalek, and I have to be mevatel all stakes. Because a suffix in and of itself is already a siman of not good things. But just to give you an understanding of what the chaos of Simchas Torah was, and that how it was an avir where the Rebbe took anybody and everybody wanted to have a shaykhus, the Rebbe roped everyone in the course of this most Giluyim time of the year. The Rebbe says then about the Shluchim saying L'chaim, that if someone has a suffix, whether or not it goes into together of a shliach, he should say L'chaim. So instead of saying that a suffix is a terrible thing and it's a sin on something, chas v'shalom, not what it should be, the Rebbe says the very inyan that he has a suffix is a raya that he has a shaykhus to it. Maybe he should also say l'chaim. In other words, over here the Rebbe said that a suffix is a good thing. It's a good sin. And this was, in general, the avir of Simchas Torah. The Rebbe's Ushpiz is that everyone who was in the Daladamas during that time felt an incredible and unparalleled closeness to the Rebbe. Numerous times in that Fabrengen, the Rebbe said, as we saw the Sibbergeben zu Diva seine Nidda. So clearly, what the Rebbe said then, what the Rebbe did all the years and said all the years, he had all of us, as we stand here today, in mind. And this is specifically what the Rebbe was giving the Giluyim for. It's only a question of the Bechira Chavshus of every one of us to take all of the things that we're about to hear and to bring it down into our own Aveda B'Peil, and to recognize that these are Giluyim that are given to us, even just by virtue of the fact that we hear it. We're going to begin from the beginning of Sukkos, and we'll go through our Chashava panel here today. First, we'll go around all that we can possibly hear in the course of the next half an hour. A few minutes for each of the panelists describing specific elements of Sukkos, and I'm sure they have other things to say, maybe a little bit before Sukkos or after Sukkos also. Everyone will soak in every word, and then after that we'll talk about Simchas Torah more in detail. So we're going to begin with one of the most chashuv of Chassidim Deren, Rabbi Meir Harlig, who had the incredible spleas over the years to be the Rebbe's agent, allowing all of the Yidden who wanted to make a bracha on the Lulav Esrog, the history behind that, and the making of the Lulav Esrog itself, Chalukah, V'dal, Minin, and Michoel, the first days of Yom Tov, by our Heilige Rebbe, the Meir.
You see, You should thank Rabbi Deren for this beautiful introduction. One day when you'll speak, I'll introduce you also. I want to give a little synopsis, but not all of you were around and maybe didn't know about Tishrei. Tafshin, by all the Rebbeim, there was just a custom that Rosh Hashanah they said a mimer. Tafshin Yud Beis, the Rebbe said before Rosh Hashanah that you should prepare Harlig and wine because he wants to eat one Suda with the Meir for Rosh Hashanah. So the custom was the Rebbe washed. He said to sing the Lagoon to the Rebbeim. Then he said a Seligson. Then the Rebbe got up and he threw challahs to the whole island. Especially, there was a man, one Helderman from New Jersey. Originally, he was from Italy. If you don't remember, in the Zal there was a fan on the wall, and he stood there. The Rebbe got up and threw him a special challah. Then we walked, benched, and kosher bracha. Then the Rebbe said the Meir. Also, Tafshin Yud Beis, before Yom Kippur, the Rebbe used to tell lectures by his desk in his room. And how long did it take those days? 20 minutes. Then he called in the school and he asked him if there's a custom that you can go to the oil on Yom Kippur. So I think he told him yes, and the Rebbe went to the oil and he came back late and he said, Brachas and this. So then, after they finished the 4 capitals and organization, the Rebbe turned around and he said, instead of sitting and doing nothing in Kippur at night, it would be a good thing that if we sang the whole Tehillim. So there was a man, Meir, he got up and the people told him to say it very fast because the Rebbe should be able to go home and rest. When everybody finished, the Rebbe was up to either to pay or pay out. So it was emotionally, no, that somebody should go over to the Amud. But nobody wanted to go over to the Amud, so the Rebbe got up himself and went to the Amud and from the people pay. Till the end, the Rebbe cried tears, noises, until he finished the last kapitel. Also, there was a man who used to blow shofar higher from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Tafshin Yud Beis, the Rebbe called him in and told him that he should learn the Kavanas, Kiyas Shefer, and Alter Rebbe Siddur. So he told the Rebbe he knows what to learn. So the Rebbe said, thank you very much, I'll find my own qualification. Then he called in, if you ever heard of Shmuel Zalmanov, and he said that he used to daven. He said that he should also blow shofar. So he said that he can't do both together, and he nominated Mental Tenement. That's how he came into the picture to blow shofar. Tafshin Yud Beis also, the Rebbe brought down the Pidyanis. That was the only time in Kippur and he put it in his standard. By the Hafsaka, before the Rebbe went out, he turned around to me and he said, darling, the Pidyanis, are you going anyplace? I said, no, I'm going to be here. So he said, watch the Pidyanis, make sure nobody touches him, nobody opens up his standard. Are you sure you're going to be here? So I said, yes. The Rebbe went out. When he came back to Mincha, he said, everything went through, nobody touched it. And I said, yes. He said, I'm going to see Shikeh. It was also the custom that Yud Gimel at night, when the Rebbe came back from the oil, that's when he used to pick out the Eslegim. And And in Erev Yontif, when he came back from his house, that's when he picked the Rebbe, and it took him a long time. He picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down, till he picked out a sufficient amount of Rebbe, what he needed to give out to the people. He gave to the people that the political Rebbe gave, and also he started a new custom to give to the shluchim from the heads from London, from Paris, from the Vada Ruchni and the Vada Gashmi from Israel, and the Vada Ruchni and the Vada Gashmi from Australia, South Africa, and all these people. Then it was, when it was about an hour before the Yom Tov, an hour and a half, the Rebbe went into his sukkah. The first years, the Rebbe used to have 36 hadassim. So to bind 36 hadassim, you needed wide leaves. So I went to look through the oven, and I prepared on the table in the sukkah wide leaves, also a scissor, and also a knife. But he never used those, he only used the leaves from his own lulav. And also, he cut off about this much from the stem of his lulav. And it took him about 3/4 of an hour to bind the lulav and prepare it for Yom Tov. Always before he went into the sukkah, he looked up and he asked me, so the dach is aufgedeckt, so we can reingehen, binden and lulav. I used to say yes. And the B'chayim from the Friedrich, how did it start with the Rebbe giving out the lulav? The B'chayim from the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe used to take down the lulav, and he used to give it to the Olam to bench. And he used to sit on the side, and he used to drink something and eat some cake. So one of the older Chassidim went over to him, and they told him it's not proper, it's Hamish Kaplan, and the Rebbe's Aiden asked the Rabbi, the Zaynus, so the Rebbe answered him, Azach was Chassidim too, and as a Pishtovas to Shem. The first years, the Rebbe came. The first years after Tafshin Yubei Gimel, the Rabbi used to stay himself in the sukkah. Till Tafshin Chavei. Tafshin Chavei, the second night sukkah, I was standing downstairs, and a bocha came, Chadikov. Then another bocha came, Chadikov. I was afraid to go, it was the night before, but the blast, and some of the old people said things what they shouldn't, and we whatever. But the third bocha came, so I come upstairs, I come into his room, and the room is full. So Rebbe or Yom Tov, the Chadikov is near the Rebbe's room. So I figured he doesn't want to talk here, there's so many people. I come into there, she said the Rebbe's room is there. I come in, the Rebbe is sitting with a big Chassidus facing Kingston Avenue. Because behind his desk, if you're in the room, there's lights on the wall. In Yom Tov, in Shabbos, the Rebbe used to put on those lights. He said, Morgen Nochum später, so the night my lulav and Eslik, you should take my lulav and Eslik, lock it up in a safe place. And when you come, you start benching with all the people, and then when I come, you'll make hefsek, and I'll bench lulav and eslik, and I prepared something, and then he went out of and then you continue benching with the people. That was only the first year. Second year already, he told me to take the sukkah, the lulav and eslik, into the big sukkah to bench with the people. And then I went to him, and I wanted to give him tea. She said, I came to 770, I saw a big line almost to Brooklyn Avenue. I noticed elderly people. They probably didn't drink anything or they did anything before benching there. So he said, you go and bench with them. I could wait. And when all the old people finish and this, you come in and give me to eat, to drink and eat also. One year, there was a pouring rain. It was every day. You know when it finished? 27. So I asked the Rebbe that the Esek is going to get spoiled. Maybe we should bench inside. So he said, the base, I said, Esek, ruler, Esek, I should bench in Esek. Also, Shana the Rebbe used to give out lekker. And till it finished, it was very late. So after it finished, so I took out the empty boxes, cleaned up, pushed back the table, piled up all the central people gave him. And then the first year he told me that Shana Rabbi had some lekker, and I prepared 2 pieces of lekker. And also, Dr. Rebbe Shulchan stayed them without drinking any talk at Katzman Kalamar. So I poured him a Katzman and he drank. Then this is a good lesson for the future for you. One year he looks at his watch and he said, it's late. Call up my house and say, I want to come and eat Sukkos Yontiv. And then I'll come back without Mincha. And tell all the people who didn't get lekker yet not to worry. When I come back, I'll give them lekker. So I went and called up the Seligson, and she said the food isn't ready. So I told the Rebbe, so the Rebbe told me, tell her not to, so the finish Harlig, and whenever to be ready, I'll come home to eat. So when you come home, your mother doesn't have it ready, don't get nervous. Yeah, right. And I took up most of your time already, and Rabbi Deren said, Meir, you do that, so we'll give over it. Yeah, many more possible people living here, and those kind of things.
Thank you, Rabbi Harlig. So, gesund sein.
Amen.
Sukkos we know, you all know, was a very important time when the Rebbe took, among other things, the Rebbe took time specifically for Yeshiva Bachman. We will hear now from Rabbi Kaplan about numerous episodes about Sukkos the Farbrengens that took place there in the earlier years. And also regarding the chalukah of the Dalet Minim to the Orchim, which Rabbi Harlig briefly touched on earlier, and we hope, of course, other details that Rabbi Kaplan was able to see and to participate in.
Thank you very much, Deren. Meir, nobody is going to be able to repeat or even to compete with what you're saying, because I don't think anybody else sitting here had that kind of an experience. They have a person called him and gesagt und what they have. Wir haben doch alles, was jeder hat gesagt und jeder hat gehört. In the gates of Matan Torah steht that Matan Torah was to those asher yeshnoi boi v'asher einei boi. It says that everybody, every neshama, every yid was by Matan Torah. The tachlis of Matan Torah was not only for those people who were there. It's Hadover Bo, that all the things that we were there here as children and as we grew up later, was from Yeh Verstanden and Nish Verstanden. The things that we didn't get to see, the things that you didn't get to see, are as much shaykh to you as they were to us then. When we tracht durch die Sache, and try to visualize, and the aim of the kinds of things that, the kinds of ruchnistic hashpoas that those of us who were there physically had, in the Rebbe Shlach Erdgen. It's not a dimim, it's not an imagination. You will also be able to get some of the hashpoah herrlich Nochum. Sukkos hat der Rebbe auch gegeben als Sache mit Kindern. As a youngster, I can tell you, after davening, we came back to 770. Crown Heights then was a completely Jewish neighborhood. Every apartment house that you see now, populated by all kinds of people. Outside the apartment houses, there are rows of old ladies sitting there waiting for a couple of Lubavitcher boys to come by with dollar meeting. I remember I was there, even from the Yom, still before Bar Mitzvah, and the Rebbe just came down from the Sukkot, and I am in the lobby of 770, the little hall, and he thought that Eli Gross should give us a place where to go, which corner we should stand at the Lulu Desert. Und der Rebbe geht da ruhig, sie sagt, nun, ich da ruhig gegangen nach mit der Lulu. It's a typical moment. The Rebbe hat jeden Eigner sehen, the caravan inspired. Wie sie gegangen mit der Lulu. That's not just Asher Yesh, and everybody, every individual. The Farbrengens of Simchas Beis Hashem and Michoel were a very official event. Because Farbrengen began the Chayav and the Rebbe. And it was the Chatchila, Farbrengen was a Gevin mit Givon. It was the Chatchila made for Talmidei Yeshivas. And there were Talmidim of other Yeshivas who came as well. How many Yeshivas were there? How many Bochum were there in New York? But they came also to participate with the year. And the Rebbe traditionally spoke in Yonim was even a shiluf for Nigle Chassidus, but a lot of Nigle also. Some things are written down, some things are lost. The Farbrengen later on, Simchas Beis Hashem, came also as a shtikl hemshech. It came as a hemshech to the kibbutz of Tzach, which always took place on the second day of Chol Hamoed. So officially, this was called a hemshech of Farbrengen of Tzach. And it's different from bringing from all others, not just because it was in the Sukkah. It was different because the type of sichas that was spoken. If you see today the sichas of Simchas Beis Hashem, Asach Nikle, Asach Yisayus die Sachen reingeworfen. And it was interesting because the Rebbe would in the middle of the would stop and tell David Raskin he should give a baricht, a report of what happened at the kibbutz of Tzach, which began earlier in the afternoon. So the kids who stood there also felt, as a kid myself, felt a certain kind of scabrous. The mood was less ungestrengt, and sometimes the mood is that the Farbrengen of ganz Tishrei were. We're not getting to talk about Simchas Torah later on, yes? Just so please. We waited and watched for the day that we would be able also to be mentioned at Yosef with the Rebbe says. So I remember as a youngster before Bar Mitzvah, all the kids would gather and watch and just stand and watch the Rebbe. How the Rebbe responds to people. Guckt und sagt, Rebbe gemacht Nanuim, die waren auch Menschen, was gemacht Nanuim. The Rebbe generally stood.
English.
Oh, I went to English, I'm sorry.
Nanuim.
Nanuim is in English. The Rebbe generally used to stand with a Virgidei Kaplan, as I remember, with one of the Magorim of the Rebbe Marash. You remember anything different, Rebbe? The Rebbe Marash, the Bichul Biksav Dafke, and he would stand and look up for 1 second. People walked in and made a bracha. The Rebbe would give one look up, would say Amakon Nas Lahachzin, and look back into the Sefer. Up and down, up and down. Anybody want to try to learn like that? Yeah. And we watched as kids when his eyes were in the Sefer, there was nothing going on. That's it. Somebody else walked in, the second up, nothing. That's what you see. It took an hour, 45 minutes in the early years. Rabbi Harlig remembers there was a half a dozen Yidden, so how long did it take? I'm talking already in time, it was 40 minutes, maybe 40 minutes.
Who went in there? Everyone?
Everybody over Bar Mitzvah. Everybody. So versteht the first year I was Bar Mitzvah already. With Rav gave, but you know, your hands are shaking, your feet are shaking, and everything. You know that Rebbe's going to look at you, and I'm settling down. The pachad that a kid felt just walking in there and trying to make a walk in front of the Rebbe. Every kid, the Rebbe relaxed them. A bracha, a voice. So every one of you would have been said the same way. The early years when the Rebbe was standing. I think that I have more to add perhaps when it comes to talking about Simchas Torah. Tell you about the Farbrengens that took place on a regular basis in the Sukkot. Every Eirach who came was a ganzer Eitzer Bolum. Everybody looked at him as an Eitzer to come and to be Farbrengen with the Elam. And every single night, there was a Farbrengen. And nobody waited until he was 17 years old to come to Farbrengen. We were kids, 11, 12, 13 years old. Every kid came to every Farbrengen to come in Shaykhas. Came, stood, watched, heard a word, whatever it was, but that was the whole Aviri in 770 was there. Versteht ihr mich als? Mit sich zugegessen habe ich so later when we sat by Rebbe's Farbrengen, the Aviri was a little bit different. We had a little bit of a record. We heard from Chassidim, a Volkswagen Rebbe, a Volkswagen, was here, 16 Farbrengen Rebbe. We didn't come unprepared. Even as kids, we stood in the back, just watched or looked at the Rebbe, we didn't understand the Sikhs. But against the background of hearing of all the things that we heard from Elter Chassidim, and their attitude was faced the Rebbe. So our attitude, of course, was based upon the things that we heard. It wasn't the din in our Cholim. Sie haben direkt Voshes Rebbe, wir haben always given the yachas, the relationship between your man, how you stood in front of the Rebbe. So the way we felt when we stood in the Farbrengen was completely affected by the things that we heard from the Elter Chassidim. That's only natural. And Sukkos particularly, it was every single night.
Kaplan. When you're saying the Lashon Asher Yeshnei Asher Nenepei is actually Baruch Shekinah. That's exactly the words that Rebbe used in this Farbrengen of Simchas Torah. When the Rebbe spoke at length about there's a living evidence to be the Zayin Dog. We'll now hear from Rabbi Seligson, who, as you know, was Zeicha to be Asik in many different prints of Hayem Yem and received, amongst many answers, the Lashon of the Rebbe, the Chol HaMefaret Harein of the Shubach. So we'll hear now Pratim of the first days of Sukkos by the Rebbe's Daladamas.
The Rebbe Michoel had the minhag to Farbrengen the second day Sukkos. He was like ending the first days of Sukkos. The Rebbe would wash and the Rebbe would Farbrengen. That was by the end of the second day Sukkos. This went on for, in the Messiah's years, it went on for 20 years, till Tavshin Lamed. Tavshin Lamed was the last year that the Rebbe Farbrengen in the Sukkah with the whole Elam. The Seder was that the Rebbe would wash, the Rebbe would continue with the Farbrengen. This was challah and wine, this was the Farbrengen, the Tina, and there would be a Meir, Sukkos Meir, Sichas, sometimes on the Ushpizin, on one of these occasions, the Rebbe discussed the union of Shina B'Sukkah, and he gave the meaning Chabad, not sleeping in the Sukkah, Nei Sukkah, different things that came up that the Rebbe discussed in these Fabrengens. Fabrengen did not go on for mamish hours like a Simchas Torah Fabrengen, and after Fabrengen, the Rebbe would have Meir, the Abdullah, and then Keshel Bracha. This is how the Seder was in general. If it was the Kriyos like this year, that the second day Sukkot was Friday, so the Rebbe waited for the Keshel Bracha till the next day. There was another Fabrengen, 1:30 in the afternoon, Shabbos Chalamed, and after that Fabrengen, the Rebbe gave out Keshel Bracha, because the night before already was before Kabbalah Shabbos, so the Rebbe made a Seder that the Keshel Bracha should be the next day. And this is how it went on, as mentioned, 20 years. It was Tavshin Lamed, that it was an accident that happened at the Sukkah. Rabbi Marlo got hurt, fractured, had many fractures on his leg from a table that fell on him. And the Meir, the Rebbe said, he's not taking any more achrayas that Fabrengen in the Sukkah. And he started to think about different answers, what to do. The Rebbe says if there's any place where we can Fabrengen, the Rebbe says it has to be close to 77. So there were different things that came up. The Rebbe didn't accept any of them. The Rebbe didn't consent to it. And the Meir, the next year, Gehasim Lamadalef, that there's no Fabrengen in the first day Sukkot. We were very surprised when it came to Tavshin Lamadalef. A Yediyah comes out from the Rebbe, there'll be a Fabrengen, second day Sukkot. In Shul, and it'll be Avtrukim. Avtrukim means no L'chaim, nothing besides the Sichas of Maimon. Nothing to say L'chaim. Bring them, and actually that year was a very special year. This was the year, as known, that the Rebbe formed his own UN. The Rebbe then chose Chassidim from all over the world that came for Tishrei, and the Rebbe appointed them that they're the delegates that represent the different countries. And there were times when Fabrengen that the Rebbe asked, "Who's in meine Big Four?" Big Four meant it was the four, like in the UN, the four big powers. So the Rebbe gave them the L'chaim separately. Simchas Torah was a whole Indian around this Indian of the UN. The Rebbe mechabed them with hakofes. The Rebbe said a sicha standing, made the Fabrengen before hakofes. And at a certain point, the Rebbe said that the Seder Idach, that the UN after their session, even though they go somewhere, they go to theater or somewhere, the Rebbe says, "Oh, but it's about to young to be this nishayach, so the Rebbe says that Ma'in is on Machakula and it will be made to everybody. So someone rolled down from the bleachers, and this was basically what took place then. And the Rebbe said the gates are given, and then the Rebbe gave L'chaim to the different delegates. So this was in Tavshin Lamed Aleph. In Tavshin Lamed Beis, it's called as the Russian Tishrei. This was the Tishrei that many people came out of Russia earlier, and they came to the Rebbe for Tishrei. The Zaltzman family, others, and the Chodaitos also came then, so Bizol Shveter. That's when the Nigunim came. Many Nigunim came, arrived in Crown Heights. And there was a group of people that walked over to the Rebbe, Shabbos Chalamed. It was like, I think the Kriyas of this year, Friday night. Remember, it was after Kabbalah Shabbos. It was after the first day's Yom Tov. And they asked the Rebbe for a Fabrengen. The Rebbe asked, they asked the Rebbe Fabrengen. This is what I heard from another good Rebbe. She was one of the goods of them. So the Rebbe told him, "Ihr seid doch nicht von Land. You're not from here, so you're not familiar that it's possible to sakone to Fabrengen the Sukkah. And the Meir, it's not possible to Fabrengen the Sukkah." So they asked the Rebbe if the Fabrengen in Shul. So the Rebbe says, "Avtrukim Fabrengen." I'm dry, it doesn't go. The Rebbe said, I won't remain embedded. And the next morning there was a Maimah, 9 o'clock in the morning, Shabbos morning. I mean, it was a day later, Shabbos Chalamed. There was a Maimah, a Maimah at 9 o'clock, an hour before Shabbos. Downstairs was the place where the Rebbe sits by Fabrengen. There was also a Seligson for them that Tishrei. There were even very many Kiruvim. The Rebbe gave out mashke to them by Fabrengen. The Rebbe asked them to sing the Nigunim there was the first time that the Rebbe spoke in Russian, a Sikha by Fabrengen. Mitzovim Lamed Aleph was the first time that the Rebbe spoke in Bilo de Fabrengen, and the Rebbe started speaking Russian. And he was giving over a teichel of the previous Sikha, and this was the first time I listened to the Elam that came. Another time that the Rebbe Fabrengen also was concentrating all on the first days in Shul was basically Fabrengen Tavshin Lamed Aleph. It was then that the war broke out in Tishrei and the Kippur. And the first day, Sukkos, we got an idea that Rebbe's Fabrengen. Everybody's wondering how's it going to work. After in Shul, there was a Fabrengen then. I never saw a Nochum for that Fabrengen. I never saw something in print from that Fabrengen. The only thing that we all remember from that Fabrengen was the famous Pisgam, Mola Oretz Fabrengen. That the Rebbe spoke, that Bochum Madrein on Kingston Avenue, mit tut gar nicht, mit dreht sich, man spielt, man not doing anything. Und man darf sitzen und Fabrengen, and Roshit, man spielt und Fabrengen. And that's when they started Fabrengen everywhere, and the Rebbe said it should be a Mola Oretz Fabrengen. This is the only thing from that Sikha Kapanem. I've said that I think I never saw any Anocha from that Fabrengen. The minor did come out, it was my Michoel Sukkos and Torah, but not the Sichas. Another time that Rebbe Fabrengen that year was Shabbos Chalamet. It was then that the Israeli army was already on the front and engaged in fighting with the Syrians. The Rebbe was pushing very much they should conquer Damascus even for a day to pale and feel Saruach by capturing and conquering a capital of the country. And the Rebbe was pushing it very much. We see it also in the Sichas in early winter of Galit. So the Rebbe then again Fabrengen in Shul, again after Shabbos Chalamet, and the Rebbe spoke a whole lot of difference in the year of Damascus. How it is in Tanakh, how it is in Kabbalah, how it is in the Mishnah in Sefer Chala, which happens to be the Sion of Chala that the Rebbe made on both Tishrei 4 days before the war. The Rebbe was speaking about Alexandria, Mitzrayim, and Damascus. Another thing that happened the first days was that the Rebbe would come into the Sukkah, to the big Sukkah, to visit the Orchim, to speak to them. The Orchim were all sitting, the Orchim fit in the Sukkah. The Rebbe asked for the Dichta, and the Rebbe would walk around, and then the Rebbe, there was one point the Rebbe asked for a bench to stand up, and the Rebbe would speak a sikha to them, and Abisha Yaroslavsky, who was the one that founded the Union of Asia, would push it walking with the Rebbe. The Rebbe wanted him to walk ahead. He wasn't comfortable to walk in front of the Rebbe, so the Rebbe said he's under the Machna Seidach, the Balabas. So he walked from the side, and the Rebbe walked in, and looked around, and the Rebbe stopped at a point and said a sikha. So maybe this was all already, even when the Orchim started to come already, so it was from year to year, in the Sukkos, there was a sikha that took place then. There was one year that was Shabbos Shuvah, that the Rebbe was on the way home, he went through Kingston Avenue, he went up where the Caleb is now, originally it was called the Kaplan, the opinion had many names. And the Orchim were eating their Shabbos Shuvah, so the Rebbe came to them and gave them a bracha. Another minyan, and I'll conclude with this, which also began in the first days, was the Beis HaSheva. The Rebbe started to speak sichas every night, from Tovshin and Malach and on. Every night there was sichas, 1 year, a second year, third year, people didn't know from one night to another, and the Rebbe started one night after another, a year after a year. It was Hakil and Malach, and it went through new days. The Rebbe connected it with the Shtisim, the Rebbe connected it with the Shurichitas. When it started the Limud Rambam, the Rebbe connected with Shir Rambam. And then there was Chazorah, it was Pashat Arayke, the Ishmak, that right after the Rebbe left, the Rebbe went back to his room after the Sikha, the Elam would sit down and Kutzas, the light would not go home to the Suda, to the Chazorah, to the Mid Chazorah. It was like the Pashat Ishmak, every Sikha was like, it was a special like Guyim, Ein Sikha, Zweite Sikha, Third Sikha. The Rebbe would say it from the place by down. Sometimes, speaking from a point of view of needing to write down the sichas after that, it was sometimes difficult. It feels like this year, there were 3 sichas, 3 nights that we couldn't write it down to Michoel Shabbos. So it was Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night. But this was a whole Muchayas, and actually, this sparked the Simchas Beis HaShem in the streets. Because when the Rebbe started to speak so much about the meaning of Simcha, Wachen felt sitting by Fabrengen was not enough, but Aftan Snegas. So it started with a few cheder in the street, it's now, and then it developed into a whole Beis HaSheva. The Rebbe spoke about it many times. The Rebbe spoke at the Gasel Mitans, and the Rebbe spoke at Shabbos Ani from Shus HaYochid. About it becomes a rikud, a circle. Coming young that the Rebbe's Misyachos, but the Rebbe said that our Einschlag in the Bolotzei, you should also dance. And many different young. There was one time the Rebbe said, "Was of Rena Bolotzei in a Shlichus in Yikumen, was it nice? What's taking place?" Different young that the Rebbe referred to it, and the Rebbe was very much mechaber. This is basically all connected with the first day Sukkos.
Rabbi Katzman will now continue about the Sukkos Beis HaSheva and how it evolved together with the heroes that the Rebbe gave about the Shluchos Galari Asada to create Sukkos Beis HaSheva there. But how welcome after you, Rabbi Katzman, I thank you for the fact that 4 years Shabbos after Shabbos was able to stand up and bring them. So then thanks to the Rabbi Katzman.
I'm looking forward to standing in. I'm going to let you be it, even though you're much bigger than me. If I would know with whom I'm sitting on the panel when they ask me, I probably would say no, because they have the real things. I'm going to have to give as a commentary from the side, or maybe a little more from the reaction, how I grew up as a child in the Chofs, then in the Lametz, the Bocha, and then in the Nems. From the early memories that I have, first of all, just for the record, there was no such thing before Sukkot that everybody went crazy buying for an essay. Well, about Shibna, we gave an essay. But everyone else, we had the Rebbe's essay at the bench. And the only reason you needed another set, you needed your own set, was because you had to go Mitzvah Daled Minim. As Mitzvah Daled Minim was one of the first Mitzvahim that the Rebbe established. Way back up Shibna Daled and Gimel. So this was part of the, but that was your only focus. Erev Sukkos, the focus was who is getting an essay from the Rebbe. So for those who were able to afford the time, they didn't have to build their own sukkah or they wiggled their way out of home. You hung around 770 to see who were the ones, and what Harlig did not mention, for example, is that the Rebbe also gave an essay to Zohar Begel.
Yeah.
Zohar Begel was a major thing by the Rebbe, first the Israelis and then the French, and then it grew over the years. As a kid, there were a bunch of sukkahs around 770. There was the Rebbe sukkah in the front. There was the big sukkah for the Elam on the side. There was another sukkah on the second floor in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment. And when I was a child, the Rebbe used to eat there Sukkos Yom Tov. So I remember conceptually, people would not go up. Like by the Seder, many people would go and watch the Rebbe by the Seder. By Sukkos of Yom Tov, otherwise, it was not so accepted. I do remember once there was a bocher who came down to the sukkah after the Rebbe finished eating, and he said he was there. And ich hab Shadam Yishabera from the bocher, and he's probably telling his great-grandchildren about it. I actually see some here, whatever. In any case, an interesting thing, when the Rebbe used to finish the Sukkah, he used to daven Mincha afterwards. Mincha was not like at a later time, but rather an earlier time, like 2:30 or 3. The Rebbe used to daven in the small zal after he finished the Sukkah. What was Sukkot as a child? Another thing that was very special for me, and maybe I hate to reveal it, it's not a very complimentary thing, but there was a shtickle balabatischkeit approach to the first day's Yom Tov. I don't know why. Today, Achmona Litzlan, we cannot call it that. But there was such a thing that certain bochum used to go away. They used to go home for the first day's Yom Tov. I'm later it's called Mishteila Given Aladas, but apparently in the Chofsa it was still acceptable. Which meant that a few places opened up by the Fabrengen. So for me as a kid it was good, because by the Sukkos and Fabrengen, I always had a good place. Like a normal place. Usually as a child, the later years you saw the kids used to sit mamash around the Rebbe. When I was a kid we didn't sit around the Rebbe, but what we did do, we sat under the Rebbe's table. The bima was made of tables, not of a fancy bima like today, so there were pushing holes. And we used to sit under the table and pray that a drop of wine should fall down from the Rebbe or a piece of cake. And sometimes we did things that we were not supposed to do, but I'm not going to mention that now. So Sukkos, we had that place. I remember having a very coveted place. I was mamash, like in the first shura, and next to Shmuel Hechtol Hasholem was standing there. And I don't remember if any, it's like if any of the Kaplan brothers were there. Shmuel Hecht, I remember specifically, he's from Meir. I remember I was sitting between them. I had a first row. What do I remember? I remember, again, Rabbi Seligson will probably tell me the exact year, but I think it was Chodala, maybe Chodgimel, when Rebbe Futafas came the first time. Rebbe Mendel and Rebbe Sasonkin. He came Kislev Chodala, so this is Tishrei Chodheim. So Chalamed Sukkos, the Rebbe was Mechabed in the middle of Fabrengen, by the Fabrengen. He was Mechabed Rebbe Mendel and Rebbe Moshe to sing Anitten that they sang in Russia. As a kid, to me, they looked like two brothers, because they both wore caps, and they both had big beards. I thought they were two brothers, and they were singing Anitten, was gesungen dort. Another scene I remember from the Fabrengen was by one of the Keshel Brochas, which I remember, I think was the same as like now, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, and the Keshel Brochas was Shabbos by day, and it was a tremendous rain. And the Rebbe stood and gave Keshel Brocha in the rain. And the tnuas of Simcha, how the Rebbe was made, was extraordinary. It was like something as if fakir, you know, how the Rebbe reacted many times when somebody wanted to give him an umbrella or something. The Rebbe said, why should you want to protect yourself from it? So the Rebbe saw Gishme Brocha in the Sukkah, it said Gishturet. There was a certain scene where the Rebbe threw off his coat. I just have a vague memory of that.
Sukkos of Tess. Second Fabrengen. Zweiten Tag Sukkos, auf Test, die Klüche gefällt.
Okay, see, I don't remember, so remind me, it's straight to zero, but let's get into it. From the first Michoel was, of course, Mivtza Lulav. So together with that, what later developed into mitzvah tanks or sukkah so the first projects that took this form was Taka Sukkos also. Sukkos, they started with little trailers, U-Haul trailers that used to hook up the cars, and then they got the pickup trucks or flatbed trucks, and you can see, they always used to wait for the Rebbe to come and see the truck parked in front of 770, and you saw a special Nachas on the Rebbe's face when he saw this. The major occupation in terms of a mivtza that Chassidim were busy with was Simchas Beis HaShe'ela, the Rebbe time geführt, in addition to the fact that they spoke before there were Fabrengens. First of all, there were 3 major Fabrengens in Crown Heights every Sukkos, especially the second night. There was the Fabrengen of the Mendel Futterfass on Empire Boulevard. There was the Fabrengen of the Rabbi Meir, wherever he used to Fabrengen by one of his children. And there was the Fabrengen that Rabbi Harlig was very nervous about what the Rebbe was going to tell him in Rabbi Harlig's Sukkah. Those were the 3 classic Fabrengens. The focus was on Simchas Torah. Actually, the Rebbe addresses it in one of the Sichas I think it's Membezo in Gimel, that Rebbe speaks about the fact that by Chassidim Amol, instead of dancing, they used to focus on Fabrengen. So Simchat Bris HaShehebe, the Rebbe instituted that you should travel to Orei HaSodeh. They would travel to within relative driving distance, probably up to 4 or 5 hours. You see us, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and they would organize groups of Chassidim to go and Fabrengen. At a certain point, the Rebbe gave very specific heroes, and he wanted that these Fabrengen should include like a mini United Nations. Every Fabrengen should include somebody from Eretz Yisrael, somebody from Europe, and somebody from another continent, and somebody from here. That was a major occupation. I remember Rabbi Costello, that was running from morning to night, finding people to put together for trips. I remember my first almost speeding ticket I got was on one of those trips. And the Rebbe insisted he wanted a duch of every Fabrengen with all the details and who was there. Just to fill in the detail of that Rabbi Seligson mentioned, 2 little points. Number one, Tafshel Lamed, what broke was actually the whole bina they built for the Fabrengen. The entire bina collapsed. There wasn't just like one table or something, but the bina that people were standing on, the whole bina collapsed, and Rabbi Marlo stood at the back. So they all ended up on top of him. Another Nochum, when the Rebbe was speaking to the Russians, when they came to ask the Rebbe for a minor, for a Fabrengen, the Rebbe apologized to them and said, it's not your fault, but the Rebbe gave them a chelik for all the chatoim of the Crown Heitzers. Everything that we did wrong, so these newcomers from Russia had to be the Kabul. If I remember correctly, the Rebbe used the expression, in ganz New York in Ishtoki Bedin, or the Rebbe complained that somebody came into the yeshiva to eat. They threw him out because he's not a Talmud yeshiva, he's on an Eira. So it was a very interesting reaction from the Rebbe.
Story from a trip to Orei HaSodeh. Someone was in the car, Rabbi Reichik. So he received a lulav and esrog from the Rebbe, and when he went out to Orei HaSodeh, he took it with him. I guess maybe it went earlier in the day, but he sat in the car. The person was sitting there. He sat in the car, so he wouldn't let go of it. He was holding the lulav and esrog in his hands the whole time. They stopped in the car for a few minutes, placed on the side of the road, put it down on the roof, and then he got back into the car. Obviously, he missed it by a second. He forgot for a second, and the car started driving off. And he gives like a Tishrei, and they stopped right away. And it was already a while down the road. The car had flown down the road, and there was cars already going by it. And he walked out to get the lulav and esrog to see what happened to it. It was probably damaged. The lulav and esrog, the lulav was on the side of the road, totally undamaged, and the esrog was on the middle of the yellow line, perfectly straight without any damage. So he picked it up and took it home. Before we go to Sukkos and Simchas, I'm one of the Rebbe that went home one year for Sukkos for the first days. I don't know if it's not the Sukkos, but it was as you know, Nun Beis was the big Sukkos. So I'd like to ask Meir, Rabbi Harlig, Rebbe Meir, to please give a detailed description of what happened on that morning, as much as you can, for the 6 hours that Rebbe stood. I got from already saying thank you for certain things. I came back after Yom Tov, realized what kind of idiot I was. So I wrote, at least I should, I wrote in explaining where I was, what I did, and I also spoke about that. I was a little more serious than my Chaver and the Harlig. I wrote 2 two things about the Shiva and about to tell you where I was for the first day. So it was the only time I was able to have the master actually showed me the Sav Yad, the Rebbe's answer on the Gilead, the paper that I wrote. But Al Kaplan, if I felt, I will now ask Rabbi Harlig to please tell us the details of that day.
The custom was that the Rebbe came, he went into his room, he brought out the lulav and nestle, and he used to ask me if the sukkah is open, and he went into his room, into the sukkah, and he benched Esrik and lulav. Then a short while later, he opened up the door, and the Esrik and lulav was on the table, and he said, I should take it to the people, and on the time it happened during all the years that sometimes the Rebbe wanted to change the Esrik and the lulav, etc., etc. This time, he opened up the door, and the Rebbe was walking with the lulav and Esrik in his hand. So I asked the Rebbe, fighting, you want to change something or whatever? So he said, no, man is behind, it must stay in LA. Just today, I'm going to stand myself and show me where you make this in the ruler with the people. And it started 10 after 8, and it finished 10 to 3. He was standing. In the middle, Rabbi told the Rebbe it's already 11 o'clock. Wasn't in Shachar. So the Rebbe told him the davening. Then Shimshon Stark came over, and he said, he brought the Rebbe's chair, and he said, the Rebbe should sit down. So the Rebbe said, how can I sit? Outside there's a whole line of people standing like this, so I should sit down. It's not proper. One more Nakuda I wanted to tell you, I reminded myself, Tafshin Yud Beis, the second day Sukkos, as Rabbi Seligson said, the Rebbe used to wash Harlig. In the middle, he asked if anybody knows what time it is, because the people who didn't wash and wanted to say L'chaim, they could say L'chaim there. Nobody said, he said, no, nobody has a watch. What did I know from anything? I took off my watch and I gave it to the Rebbe. He put it down on the table, he looked at it, and then the Rebbe finished for bringing, he benched, and he got up, he picked up the watch, and he said, Agoisi Shukeya, you know, I want to talk with this Kazegi. Later, after Kosher Broch and this, Meir and Shmuel came over to me, this, Simpson, they told me. So I said, nobody ever taught us in yeshiva then. So then they told me that's when the Rebbe was shot, when people bought Sukkos and Simchas watches, they used to have to redeem it for money for comfort to Mima. And the same thing by the Frierdiker Rebbe and Rebbe. So you got to be very careful and not to wear a watch on your head, not even in your pocket.
We'll now move over to Simchas Torah, which is, of course, a very difficult thing to do. Not just because it's hard to convey, but also because the Rebbe on Simchas Torah, I'm sure the panelists will agree and explain more in detail. The Rebbe on Simchas Torah, there's no error to the Rebbe and the Chassidus, but in Simchas Torah, the Rebbe was many millions of miles ahead of us. I remember one Hakafis, I think it was Memches, when the Rebbe was standing by his place. I was in the middle of the shul, and the Rebbe was being aided with his hand, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of the song, the Rebbe went like this. Memches was there. Back and forth, the Rebbe was going, they don't shlach. all of a sudden the roof came off of the top of 770. But basically, it was very clear that Rebbe was looking for a stronger reaction as Re'el to Midgate. And it's not true that it was something that, was... I'll just give you a little drop of something that I saw to explain the incredible Giluyim. It was Nun Beis. And I think it was only in Nun Beis where they placed the bima, the Rebbe's bima on top of another bima, by the Rebbe's place and also by the Ches. I think by the Ches, I remember, I wasn't there, but I wasn't standing right there, but I remember hearing afterwards, the Rebbe came to the Ches and the Rebbe asked, what is this? The Meir said, as the Rebbe comes under Elam. And the Rebbe smiled and went up to the double bima. But I remember when the Rebbe walked in that night, Nun Beis, Shmini Atzeres, was for our convenience, we gave the Rebbe 2 steps to climb up. And I remember very clearly standing there at the front, Simchas Torah, and the Rebbe was walking up the steps, and the Eil couldn't really see. The Rebbe wasn't yet up on top. The Rebbe walked up, holding the siddur, very much bent down, looking upon the Das Achton, tired, and I didn't know what was going on. That was going to Takafas. All of a sudden, when the Rebbe came to the top of the bima and put his siddur down on the stender, the Rebbe turned around and was mamish k'leivaya. The simcha was miling on the shore. But in contrast to those few seconds of the Rebbe walking up the steps, you can understand what the incredible Giluyim really were, what it took, the Rebbe's gashmis to the chaos. We'll begin with Rabbi Harlig, again, to tell us some of the details of those incredible Giluyim. There are so many details to go through. We're talking about Simchas Torah at night, by day. The day itself was incredible things that happened on the way to Akavas, on the way from Akavas. But anyway, to get to the bottom line, Rabbi Harlig.
First, how did the Rebbe start for bringing Simchas Torah before our coffers? Because the previous Rebbe asked him to bring before our coffers. That's why he bring all the years before our coffers. Simchas Torah was the Rebbe's reason, so it was much more personal than a whole year. The bringing from Simchas Torah before Kaplan was a lot of times grace and Deren. And there was one year, I think it was in Nochum, when the Rebbe said, we're going to start the Kaplan different. Right away before, I'm going to say a secret to everybody to say L'chaim. And then he said another time L'chaim. Then in the middle of the bringing, he said there's a custom that you drink a cup and you have to make bottoms up. So he drank he said L'chaim in the whole cost. He picked it up to show the oil, and he was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then he said above, as the melech slow, that's too.
Everyone was saying Shah after the...
And one year, the Rebbe wanted to go a Kaplan with the kids from Simchas Simchas Torah. So somebody was following him. So the Rebbe turned around to him and he said, I'm after Bar Mitzvah, I can find my way myself. Also, the first years, the kids used to stay on the bima, what you learn, opposite the Rebbe. And the Rebbe always used to tell me to go to the sukkah and take out all the lekach, what was left from Shana Rebbe, and give it to the kids, and make sure they all say l'chaim. There was 1 year Sukkos Torah, before our coffers, all the bochum, and the light went on Michoel, on Simchas to all the shuls. It was a rainy night, and there was the shuls around 770 that people used to come in to see the coffers, the Kaplan. And people had umbrellas, whatever. He motions to me to come up to the bima, and he gives me 2 pieces of lekker. He points the side I was standing. He said, you go over there, and you give the 2 people standing there with, give them the zeynah, see that they say l'chaim, and that's it. I would go over there. There's many people over there. They simply gefehlt for lifting back. I stopped by 2 people. They all had umbrellas. And things were jingling in their pockets. I stopped in. The Rebbe shook his head. I gave him to say l'chaim, and I gave, and I said it all on the wine and the cake. And I stood there a few minutes. Then I went back to my place. The Rebbe said, "I place in Shikei." There was once a person, Sukkos Torah, who asked the Rebbe that it says that whenever you say Yizka, you have to learn Asa Tiyasa. And in Eretz Yisrael, it never happens. So the Rebbe told him, just a few days ago, you wrote me a note that you want to do what I just to feel me. So what he asked me such a question. And the way he danced in Sukkos Torah, with all the strength in this, once after Sukkos Torah, I took about 8 shirts, was still wet after Shabbos Bereshis. I don't remember in how it's supposed to have to be clean, but all the sweat and this, what happened in Sukkos Torah over these 48 hours. The Rebbe always said, I do not care about the sleep for these 48 hours because it's very auspicious time.
Yeah, it was just remind me of a certain year I got Tishrei and Ches. After that year, they were holding the Yechidus HaKadosh because I couldn't understand in the middle of the shul that year. And then everyone went slowly around the whole Elam and looked each and every individual in his face. It took a long time, the entire class. I think that was the year it took a shot out at the beginning. And then afterwards, there was dancing alone, and it was incredibly lovely.
One more thing, that after the shot left us, the Rebbe used the person who sat in that coffin dance with his father's name.
The third and touching day is that it dance for 3 Nevurim by the 7th of 3-7. Rabbi Kaplan.
I want to be mad something to you. Simchas Torah in the Babach was never just a matter of dancing with the Seligson. The Tachlis was always the Simcha of Simchas Torah. But till they actually got to HaKofis, the Fabregins in the Babach and by the Rebbe also had a much more important and effective place than just HaKofis themselves. And I want to bring out a number of nekudas with regard to this. The Gilu Bir Odom. It wasn't a matter of going to HaKofis, let's go and dance. Look for Bracht. But you had that thing is the Gezach. And from there you went to HaKofis. And that was the way it always was. People like I should tell the story of Tavshin Yutes. I'll tell the story of Tavshin Yutes because a little bit of Chaval. Anybody remember which thing the Rebbe taught of Shirtes? Shamil's. To try to give you a little bit of a feeling of what it was like, the whole sukkah, the shalash, was half the size of this room. It was packed. It was half the size of this room. One side was completely open. Now it was packed in. So there was supposedly a little bit of breeze. Shy a little bit to breathe, so supposedly. But my recollection is when we used to go home after our covers and come back into the Nigen. Came back to the Nigen, jam-packed as Kivobish. A little tiny bimmy in the middle of the shalash. The bimmy was made up of a piece of plywood on top of milk boxes. That was where the Rebbe was going to stand. And everybody was around on all four sides. As a kid, I remember seeing almost a little cloud rising up from the Elam. That was how packed the place was. When the Rebbe came in, to walk through that kind of a little, it wasn't a matter of making a shvil. It was shvil, you couldn't move. So there were a couple of chevre with very strong arms who pushed the Elam aside a little bit and held the place apart so the Rebbe should be able to walk through. I remember the Rebbe coming in with a bottle of mashke with a terribly serious face. He made with his hands like a gizugin, but his face was terribly serious. And I remember as a kid thinking that the body language doesn't reflect what's going on in the face. They looked at their eyes were, he's very serious. And he got up on the little bima and he began to tell the story of Shamil. And we saw the Rebbe cry many times. We saw the Rebbe cry when he showed his tears. Sometimes a little Harlig would break down crying. But the tears where his whole body shook. His whole metzias was just shaking. His body was just shaking. As he told the story first to Michoel and then the Nimshah. And you can imagine what the Rebbe was like, just watching him answer like that. And then he began to teach the Rebbe. It was a difficult week. A little piece, noch a kleine Kinder. Sie gesessen dort in der Schulzauberlingen, Alashevsky, der Meir sein dort, a difficult thing to get. As a kid, I was shy, I wasn't capable of being to catch something which is such an idol to do it. But all of a sudden, it seemed as though the pull from his face left. The Ernstkeit for a second left. The tears dried up. And Ananda Welting Ganzen. I'm talking now with the perspective of a kid. Ananda Welting Ganzen. When he used to give mashke after the Nigen to everybody who promised to have a shir in Chassidus, so kids weren't allowed to go over. We were still kids. But his face shined, smiles. Comments to everybody like that. Akira Badas. So you see, on the one hand, the tremendous Ernstkeit, the tears, the simcha, the Akira Badas to people. It's not human consciousness that can change like this. Verbringen, the Nigen ended about 6 o'clock in the morning. And everybody went home. As you can imagine, 9 o'clock in the morning to get up to go to the mikveh and go down and dafke, it wasn't exactly what I was doing that year. So around 12 o'clock I got up at 12:30, which was also pretty early. And I'm making my way down Kingston Avenue. I'm hurrying to Spet. And all of a sudden, as I approach Kingston Avenue and President Street, I meet the Rebbe's mother. So I've been in the house a few times. She knew me. I said, Yosef, Yosef, du gehst in Shul? You going to Shul? I said, yeah. No, we're getting in. Let's go together. Then she said to me, of course, later I realized what it was all about. She asked me, du bist gewesen nachts im Liegen? Was I yesterday at the Liegen? I said, I am proud, yeah, I was at the Liegen. Was für ein Liegen? So, what am I going to say? I didn't remember the Liegen, frankly. It was still someplace. I said, the Liegen, denke ich, aber der Rebbe sehr stark gewählt. I told the Rebbe's mother, the Rebbe sehr stark gewählt. What do you want? A 12-year-old kid. So we walk together, and we come down to the shalash, and normally she would go to the side where the women would stand. She went down to the two front doors, walks together with me. I open the door for her, she stands there, she comes in. I don't know what I was supposed to do. I'm standing next to the Rebbe's mother, she's standing at the door, and this is in the middle of Hakofas, the Rebbe standing on top. It wasn't a beaming. A piece of Rebbe's something small. Nicht wichtig was zu tun, I didn't know exactly what to do. I tapped the guy in front of me. A little late. Took a moment, and a shvil opened up all the way to where the Rebbe was standing. And the Rebbe turns around and he sees his mother. So he shook his head, and paid the hand. She stood for a moment, she said, Yosef, and she left. Later on, somebody said to me, what are you doing there? How'd you come with her? What happened? So I told them the whole story, but to me, I don't know. She asked me where I was. I said I was at the Nikkas, and they had a cry. She wanted to go see how he was. As I'm my seat over the sales, She wanted to check out and see what's going on. But this is a little myself, a personal issue. The vote is every child. It's new. Your place is not with the Rebbe. 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Don't lose the Rebbe, that's your place. We also knew that as much as we don't know, but just to be there, that's what's going to lift us up. That's what's going to do everything for us. The Ma'amad U'Matziv of a bocher is not to think to himself, it will come in and make a cheshbon, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You have to be where the Rebbe is. You're a chassidim or not where the Rebbe is. That's your job. That's one nekuda I'm going to say. Another nekuda. Shmini Atzeres Tov Shin Yud Ches. Now, the shalash used to have a little roof which would go over from the building 770 into the shalash, because that was the roof in front of the garage doors. You know what the shalash was? It was a big parking area, and there was a quadruple garage, which is today the library. And there were big garage doors there, and over the garage doors there was a little roof. The roof was about 5 feet wide. The sukkah and the shalash went over the little roof, and the beams of the sukkah went to the top of the little roof. That year, about 15 kids decided, what are we standing in the back of Kaplan trying to see the Rebbe? Let's lay down on the roof. There was about this much space between the schach and the roof. We'll lay down on the roof. The kachava, we lay down on the roof with your leg. And the Rebbe took note. He saw us a bunch of England. So he told each one of us individually to say l'chaim. Like this. Everybody individually said l'chaim. The simas lev for a kid sitting on top of the roof over there, everybody got that individual attention.
Undergarments.
All undergarments. Kids, where the kids? As time went on, of course, the Eilah became so much bigger. Just to turn over from a Fabrein to a place where we can engage Sarkophis was a tremendous. You can imagine what it means. A couple of thousand people getting up all of a sudden, and you have to turn the whole room around, and all the furniture has to move to the side, and building the pyramids, and the Rebbe's coming down in 45 minutes. I mean, humanly, how it happened, I don't know. Somehow it happened, and nobody got hurt, but somehow it happened. When the oil was smaller, but the room was smaller also, just changing it around. I never remember, in all the years, that the Rebbe should come down, the oil should not be ready. It was superhuman chaos to get it ready. When the Rebbe came down for HaKofis, everything was changed. 7-7 was a different place for her. When the Rebbe came down to HaKofis, and it was crazy blessing at 1:30 in the morning generally, but later, the Eilah was different, the mood was different, the place was different. You couldn't almost recognize what happened before. And when the Rebbe came in, so he always came in, his face was always lit up, and always the simcha immediately as he turned from the door going into the shalash, he's glad he made the hand, and glad he's in that the place used to jump and dance. As they built the shul, things went, there was a larger Eilah, a larger place. It just continued to expand. But the metzias of that swap, that change from the Mudu B'Fabrengen, which is also a simcha to go B'Fabrengen, to the matzah of HaKofis, was, I don't know, for my Kleinei Yigimach, a miraculous event that came forth every year on Hezekis, and everything changed and took place properly. Wait, after somebody else a chance to talk also. So, yeah, stop.
Rabbi Seligson.
It's interesting, I mean, I have just to what Harlig mentioned, Rabbi Kaplan mentioned, that there were interesting things happening those 2 days. People, the Rebbe encouraged people, Simchas Torah in the morning, to say, to make Yiddish, Matzki the mothers was questioned like, but while Atoresa was happening before Atoresa, Matriya. And there were certain people that felt very included to the Rebbe, very comfortable. Maybe they would go over to the Rebbe. One time by a coffee, somebody went over to the Rebbe and said that this person is drinking mashke, 86 proof. What does it mean in Avedas Hashem? So the Rebbe said he's going to office, and when he's going to come back, he'll explain it. The Rebbe said 86 is the Gematria Hashem Elikim. Then he comes weiter and he says, this one is drinking 96. What does that mean? The Rebbe says 96 is Shem Adne and Shem Keel together. That's a Gematria for 96. The question is like tidbits that were happening in our coffers. There were times that the Rebbe encouraged, there was someone that came with a professor, Ruslan, and the Rebbe said he should play L'chaim, he should make Yiddish. So he said that he didn't make Yiddish at the Halbisman. The Rebbe says he should make Yiddish on his own. He should not be Yetzer with anybody, but make his own Yiddish. There was Dr. Weiss, who was there, especially right after Lamed Ches. He came, the Yom Tevin, Tishrei, and there was one point after our office, after it's a good ungearbeitet our coffee, the Rebbe showed him on the pulse. So he got scared, the Rebbe is talking about his own pulse. So he was ready to go up, the Rebbe says, no, check your own pulse. See how much he's trained within the Gunim. There was the Katzman in the morning, Simchas Torah in the morning, with an interesting, legendary Rabbi Shlomo Kazanovsky. And he, davened for Yom, and he had the outside Simchas Torah. The Rebbe would usually give him a bottle of mashke. I feel a Lamed Ches in the room. The Rebbe gave him a bottle of mashke at the Fabrengen. And he davened for the Yom. So, sie gewähnt nach Torah, finally, when you have the Kriyas HaTorah, when nimmt sich ein Sefer Torah in hand, and he's starting to say Shema Yisrael, and the Rebbe turned, the Rebbe is looking, the Rebbe makes with his hand, and the Rebbe starts saying, I'm not Avda. I'm not Avda. In those days, Sheishan Rabbi, the lady was the mother's side, a video, a picture from the Rebbe standing, dancing by Yano Avda, this was Sheishan Rabbi, and also Shminatzeres and Chasdei was very much encouraging Yano Avda, Poshet Bachanan, gesungen, and even once when they forgot to sing it by the Mitzvah, the Rebbe encouraged, when they brought the Sefer Torah back to Rodon Kadesh, the Rebbe started to sing on the Avda when they were saying Yahweh. There were different, when the Rebbe went to our conference, many people said, give the Rebbe Brochi, but the Rebbe should be by your writer, and the Rebbe would answer Amen. And there up the line to them. For example, there was one person there that was from the Ayid from Deutschland, and the Rebbe said to him, you should see to make German Berlin Lubavitch. Then the Rebbe came back from our office, he met the person again, the Rebbe says 10 minutes has passed since then, what did you do about it? The next day he chose again to stand there at the entrance to the Ches, and he asked, and again the Rebbe said, 10 hours have passed, 12 hours have passed, what did you do about it? After the young people went to Yechidus, the Rebbe gave Meir, there was one time that the place is closed, and the Rebbe couldn't get into the Schloss, and the Rebbe gave someone to the table, went up on the table, and they jumped into the Ches. So later it became the Ches. He sat down. He gave someone to the table, and then he sat down and he went into the dust. He was pushing, he couldn't get in from the other way. Bechlal, when the Rebbe would dance sarcophagus, the Rebbe would look at individual people also. It wasn't something that was just doing. The Rebbe was sometimes stopping in concentration, looking at a group of people with the head, like stopping. It seemed like he was stopping, but he was holding one hand on the Rashad, and the Rebbe was be'eided them singing. It was like the Rebbe was eyeing individual people. After our conference, the Rebbe would usually hold the Rashad for a few seconds, and once the Rebbe saw he's already settled down, that's when the Rebbe go. The Rebbe got they gave the Rebbe the Siddur back. The Siddur was usually kept by him, on the streets. He held the Rebbe Siddur, and then the Rebbe started his way back by daytime. Yeah, because he remembered the alle HaKofes zusammen, so it was and then the Rebbe made his way back. Another union, which was also mentioned before when he gave Simchas Torah, the Rebbe's day, was that Simchas Torah morning, without fail, whenever the Rebbe came into Shachris, it's been a cleaner. I remember as a kid, in the Chofs, we were able to count how many people were there. It was almost a third of the shul. And the Rebbe came in, he would start singing Simchas Torah, his father's name. That was every year before Shachris, the same numbers to the Talmud started to go, then the Rebbe turned around, and Hegel started, and Hegel the Seder from Shachris. And Shachris would finish Shachris, I think it was about 2:30, the Rebbe would finish. The Rebbe would Shachris, Vidal Torah, Vidal Diaz, it was like 2:30, so it was like a long day, a long tefillah from 10 to 2:30. If there was a Friday at the Fabrengen or any Fabrengen of Lao, you had to get ready the next few hours, or there was a Fabrengen, for example, talking about the Kriyas in Chastera, this year, in a Kriyas like this, we had 4 Fabrengens. We had one Thursday night before HaKafas. We had one Friday before Shabbos, short Fabrengen. The Rebbe generally did not continue after the Shkia. So it was basically a short Fabrengen, how long it was able to last places without benching. And then Shabbos in the daytime was Shabbos Mevarach and Cheshvan was a Fabrengen 1:30, and then there was a Fabrengen 6 o'clock. You will have that from the first Fabrengen Shabbos to the second one stayed in their place because Arish Heitzah was on weiter catching a place with Hulu. And the second Fabrengen was 6 hours. So we had 4 Fabrengens in 2 days. Chayim were going around Wismensch. What was in this Fabrengen, what was in that Fabrengen? Sometimes there's a word, I'm not sure if it's the first Fabrengen or second Fabrengen. The first Fabrengen, generally most of the people were Kalucha. And if the Rebbe said, go to someone, one of the Rabbanim that's printed in the Igris, that this is a Messias Nebush Abacharim, that by Fabrengen they can push it, while the Fabrengen is going on, they're someone, and they're on the Shlichus in Talucha. This is basically what it was. I remember one time, so I got a statement to Absalom Ber, Levitin, those like one showed me he was Lamed Dalet, Simchas Torah on Friday, and everybody was going home. This was ready after Kaplan the Shabbos, after the second Fabrengen, and the Rebbe's window was a little open. Shade was open. He said, looking what's going on. The Rebbe was sitting and learning like nothing happened. Pasha sitting and learning like this was after 2 Fabrengens and dancing 2 days. I was sitting Be'iyun, I think he told me even the name of the Sefer, it was Aram, Chumash, Mizrahi. And actually I reminded him this year again, and I asked him if I was standing or sitting, I wasn't sure. So there was Pasha sitting with Menuchas HaNefesh, like the real Indian of Atzloch Zman. And then the next day, Fabrikens. One was 1:30, one was 6 o'clock. Then Facial Bracha, another 3.5 hours. This was the biggest day on Facial Bracha. After the whole Tishrei. Next day the Rebbe went to the Eir. That's when then Yechida started, which went on for about a week. About 1,000 people, Yechidas, Pratis, went on the whole week. And then days were the first time started Yechidas closed.
We are about to show the video, but I'd like to hear a moment or two from Rabbi Katzman to conclude the evening.
I think you heard two things here about Simchas Torah. In general, the Sukkos and Simchas Torah. And I heard from everybody, from Rabbi Seligson and from Rabbi Kaplan, they emphasized the fact that the Rebbe paid attention to the individual. And I think this is something that fascinates and should fascinate everybody. The Rebbe standing with so many thousands of people, and the Rebbe was looking out for individuals. And it was reciprocal. People felt that, yes, this is my time. I remember one of the things that people used to take advantage was that you can approach the Rebbe and ask for brachas. So I remember one year, I made my place in the shvil, so when the Rebbe goes to Hakofes, I can go both ways. The one, when the Rebbe is on him, I can go to the front. When the Rebbe is back office, I can go to the back. And when the Rebbe had to go by, we would hide under the table to let the Rebbe go by. So I remember the Rebbe was walking by with the Sefer Torah, and he looked down to all of us, to each and every one. And he even moved the Sefer Torah towards us to be able to kiss the Sefer Torah. And I had with me a Geman that needed a brocha, and from under the table he asked for a brocha, and the Rebbe gave him a brocha. As a follow-up, years later, I remember I needed whatever I needed a brocha in my family, and somehow I missed Hakofes. But because we knew that the Rebbe is accessible, so I took advantage, and me and the whole problem with the Maisa not the gay, but there was another Jew here in Crown Heights who was not well, so me and Rabbi Michoel, we went to the Rebbe's room, standing by the Rebbe's door, when the Rebbe came back from the Suda in the library, and we stopped the Rebbe and we asked him for brachas. So I remember when I asked the Rebbe bracha, the Rebbe answered to me, I got the 4 words, there's a whole story about it, but not for now. And I don't know, but just one little scene, how the Rebbe was extremely paying attention to seeing Chassidim b'simcha. Two little scenes. One scene I remember, I believe it was Tav Shemam Gimel. The Rebbe was coming from his house on Shmini Atzeres, and there were 2 Chassidim, Reb Moshe Grimberg and Levi Pressman, 2 Russian Jews. And they took a little chayim, and the Rebbe was coming back from his house, and they were outside, so suddenly dancing. All of a sudden they noticed the Rebbe from far, so instead of dancing in circles, they grabbed each other by the shoulders, and they started dancing, facing the Rebbe, staying in one place. So you can see from down the back how all of a sudden the Rebbe's face lit up, smiling, and the smile like grew bigger and bigger, and as he came closer, he started making his hand. The Tzvei Yidin was dancing Simchas Torah. It was like a very personal, paid attention, Tzvei Yidin like a Simcha. Another scene was once when the Rebbe came out from Hakofes. I'm not sure if it was Leil Shmini Atzeres or it was Leil Simchas Torah. And Hessel Zeitlin and Nuh Aguta Bissel Mashke. And he was standing there with Tzumai Geyom, the Nissim Angel. When the Rebbe came by, so Hessel moved into the door of the elevator in the hallway. And he's standing there and he's crying. The Rebbe walks by and looks at him and says, Is er zugegangen zum Rebbe und sagt dem Rebbe, wir sollen halten bei ein bisschen Emes. So So the Rebbe with a big smile, was a Islamis, a Sachemis.
And basically, I can't let it go without the two things that reminded me. My brother was a 4-year-old boy by the front of the room, and the Rebbe went down to the bima, so there was a lot of chaos by the Rebbe's place. And the Chaim Tashkent, sat down on my brother's head, smashed it into the table. So he was crying, and still crying by the time the Rebbe came back. So all of a sudden, my father picks him up and turns him to, the Rebbe's looking at him. As soon as he turns around, the Rebbe gives him a big smile and says, "What's Bankston?" And then another scene, very briefly before we conclude, was when by Hakafis in the front, Rabbi Michoel had Sean was dancing with Dr. Weiss. They were dancing together, and the Rebbe threw them a kiss as they were dancing. The story of Yankee says about what happened, the dream that he had. Anyway, in a few moments we're going to see the video. Thank our esteemed panelists here for sharing with us the very thank you as well, Rabbi from the Rebbe, the hall, Tishrei that you know, the sound equipment, and all the buffers that helped set up the program. I want to share some very important items, announcements of the schedule for the next few days. Tomorrow, Monday, in Beis Tishrei at 4 p.m. for the Yeshivas Katzman, there will be a tour of Kedesh Shidurim, and at 5 for the Yeshivas Gedalis. At 8 p.m., there will be a shir in Yom Mashiach given by Rabbi Deren in Hadar Teira. On Tuesday, at 1 p.m., there will be a special tour of the Rules edition in the Rebbe's library, Shemit L'Chatzer. At 3:15 on Tuesday, there will be Mincha in the Rebbe's house, exclusive for the English-speaking Bachar. Motzei Shabbos Yudzayin Tishrei, Sukkos and Simchas Torah will be with Rabbi Gordon. 11 p.m. at the Kaplan Sukkah, 1374 Union Street, Brooklyn and Kingston. And as the video goes on, I must warn everyone here that if there are any phones out trying to take a video of this video, the video will stop and there won't be any more videos for the rest of Tishrei of exclusive for Sub edition. So this can go left there. This isn't camp, so we're not going to make any throwing out of the shul announcements, but this is going to be taken very seriously. There are bachim around the room that are looking out for anyone who's trying to take a video of what we're about to see. As the video plays, this is from Rabbi Braden's video from Tafshid and Aleph. This was not yet shown, and I will try to give you a brief running commentary if it's necessary as the video moves along.